From a device called the nano-artificial nose, which sniffs out cancer, to technology that gives sight to the blind and makes the lame walk again, Israel leads the world in medical innovation. Every day, millions around the world use some kind of medical treatment that came from Israel. Israeli entrepreneurs and scientists are also pioneers in agriculture and invented techniques that allowed the tiny nation to turn rocky desert landscapes into lush orchards and mosquito-infested swamps into citrus groves. And Israel has exported these techniques to the rest of the world. In his new book, Thou Shalt Innovate: How Israeli Ingenuity Repairs the World, author Avi Jorisch profiles wondrous innovations that are changing the lives of billions of people around the globe and explores why Israeli innovators of all faiths feel compelled to make the world better.
It's a great, fascinating book. Avi Jorisch joins me now. Thanks.
Andrew, it's good to be here.
I'm glad you're here. What compelled you to write the book?
You know, it actually is an interesting story. When I was spending the war of 2014 in Israel, it was the fear of going into bomb shelters. As I took my children in and out of bomb shelters that summer, I realized that the Iron Dome wasn't the only innovation saving lives. I knew that there was more of the story there. And I started to explore. I realized that Israeli innovations are improving the lives of billions of people around the world in science, medicine, water, and agriculture. And I knew I needed to explore that story.
Well, let's start with the Iron Dome then, for people who don't know what it is. What is it? How is it so effective?
So the Iron Dome in 2012 was the first time in human history that you could shoot a projectile out of the sky. It has a 90% success rate. And this particular innovation saves lives on both sides of the border. It saves Israelis, Palestinians, Jordanians, Lebanese, and Syrians by ensuring that if projectiles are shot in to Israel, Israeli ground troops don't have to go in, because as a defensive weapon, it ensures that Israel has the capacity to shoot these horrible projectiles out of the sky and saving the lives of its own citizens.
How about, I mean, we can go through categories here. How about how innovations in Israel are helping feed people?
Sure. So let's take, for example, agriculture, right? You have one wonderful innovation. For all of your viewers that have seen a Ziploc bag, Israel created a Ziploc bag that is used in 100 countries around the world that allows farmers to put in their grains, asphyxiate the bugs without having to use any pesticides. That particular innovation is known as the grain cocoon.
And what about water? They've done some amazing things.
Andrew, this is one of my favorite stories. Israel is the only country in the world to have declared water independence. About 5 years ago, Israel declared that it is completely independent of the weather and from its neighbors. It declared itself to be the world's only water superpower. And it did this using a number of different factors. One, it has 5 desalination plants in the country, which allows Israel to take water from the ocean and make it potable water. 2, drip irrigation are these little devices that emit micro amounts of water that you use a third of the water and double the yield. That innovation is used by over 1 billion people around the world. They recycle wastewater, and as a result, Israel can export water to its neighbors.
One of the most fascinating stories in your book is about your roommate who was in this terrible accident, and then they made a discovery, and what he did was remarkable. Tell us about it.
So Avi Jorisch, they discovered that he had brain cancer. And he decided, instead of waiting the 5-10 years that it would take to develop the technology, the doctor said, take about 5-10 years, and he would likely die. He developed this technology on his own, and I think it speaks volumes.
How did you do that?
He looked to nature. He figured out that bugs have certain eyesight and developed a camera and a device that allows you to operate small enough to go into the brain and operate. And that technology is used around the world today.
He educated himself.
He educated himself. He went to a great university. He realized he really tapped into the Israeli ethos, which I like to say is really 5 things that drives innovation in Israel. Great universities, a very diverse set of people, Christians, Muslims, Jews, Arabs, you name it, they have it. They have smart government programs, and they have a highly innovative military. And when you add the prophetic tradition, the culture of Israel, that sparks innovation. You cannot for 3,000 years repeat day after day, feed the hungry, help the sick, help those in need, and for that not to have a deep impact on the cultural DNA of your people. You cannot believe that you are to be a light unto the nations without wanting to help the other. And Avi Jorisch, the man who was diagnosed with this cancer, not only did he help himself, but he wanted to help others. And through his technology, he has also improved the lives of countless of others around the world.
One thing you didn't mention yet, which is fascinating to me, is that they allow themselves to fail and almost encourage the process a bit. Tell us about it.
So in Israel, if you have not failed in a startup, people look at you a little bit funny. We all know that the process to success is you must fail. Thomas Edison, is a wonderful example of that 1,000 times before he created the light bulb. Same thing here. Israelis have figured out that failure is part of the process. Unless you fail, you cannot succeed.
How do they make that possible for entrepreneurs?
So they have smart government programs. The government program that primarily focuses on, if you're an entrepreneur, you can put down 20% of the capital, and the Israeli government will give you the other 80%. And then if the company succeeds, you pay it back in the form of a low-interest loan. And if you fail, it becomes a grant.
Now, I've heard you say that if you're having a medical emergency in Israel, you may very well get response within 2 minutes.
So I'm
adding a few seconds there.
If I were to have a heart attack right here, right now, what would you do?
I'd start praying probably and call for help.
And you'd call 911. And on average, 20 minutes later, an ambulance would arrive. Well, in Israel, that's way too long with terrorist attacks and war on a fairly regular basis. My friend and colleague, Eli Beer, created an organization called United Hatzalah. And United Hatzalah managed to do 3 things successfully. One, it created an army of emergency responders, 5,000 in all around the country. Second, it gave each and every one of them an Uber-like application, which hails the 5 nearest emergency responders. And lastly, it gave many of them a very low-tech scooter called an ambucycle.
Is that what we're looking at?
That's what we're looking at here, which you see the low-tech scooter and a box on the back, which has medical equipment. And as a result of the 5,000 people around the country, this Uber-like application, and the ambucycle, the response time in Israel, the average response time around the country is 3 minutes, and every major metropolitan area, 90 seconds. Now, for your viewers in the United States, and particularly in Jersey City, you're from New Jersey.
I am from Jersey.
Jersey City is the first city in the United States to implement this cheap and scalable technology, but there is no reason why this tech shouldn't be around the country, in San Francisco, New York, Washington, D.C. There's no reason why. This tech is now, to some degree or another, available in 20 countries around the world, but Jersey City is the first.
Tell us finally about this prophetic prayer tradition that the Israelis have and how it factors into all this.
Well, we believe as the Jewish people that we have a social contract with God and that we are here to spread morality and social justice. 3 times a day, religious Jews pray the Aleinu prayer, which calls upon us to improve the world. The Mishnah, the classic body of rabbinic teachings, which has been around since the Middle Ages, no less than 10 times instructs us to repair the world on behalf of those that are less advantaged than ourselves. The prophet Isaiah calls upon us to be a light upon the nations. And when I bless my children on Saturday night, we bless them and we say the separation between the mundane and the holy. And the Jewish people have been trying to elevate the mundane into the holy, and that manifests itself in the technology. 70 years ago this week, Ben-Gurion declared the establishment of the State of Israel, and he did 2 things. One, he said the borders are officially open. Jews can return home whenever they wish. But secondly, he said, I quote, Israel has the great privilege and the obligation to tackle some of the gravest challenges of the 20th century. He baked in a messianic principle. He seemed to be saying that Israel's place in the world was not only to enrich its own citizens, but improve the lives of the world's citizens. There's no denying that Israel is a complicated place, but Israel also has innovators, tremendous innovators, that are bound together not by religion, money, or stature, but rather by a desire to do good and make the world a better place.
All right, real quick, you tell people to be a mensch, is that correct? How am I saying it? Am I
be a mensch, which literally means in German, it means to be a good person. I instruct my children to be a mensch, not a wilde chaya, which literally means don't be a wild animal. We all know the difference between being a mensch, a good person, and a wilde chaya. You are a father of 3 children. I'm a father of 3 children. Values are the most important things we have. The Jewish people don't have the intellectual property locked down on values. We learn that the world stands on 3 things: Torah, Avodah, and Milut Chasadim. Torah, which I really translate into values, Avodah, hard work, and charitable acts of kindness. And when you look at the state of Israel, Israel is not just an economic miracle. Israel is a country that is leveraging its technology for the benefit of billions of people. It is making the world a better place for those afflicted with multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, water, medicine, science. These are things that are helping both here in the United States and around the globe.
Avi, it's a great book. Thank you very much. I encourage you all to get a copy. Thou Shalt Innovate, How Israeli Ingenuity Repairs the World. It's available wherever books are sold.